Hey guys, what's going on? If you're new here, welcome. My name is BrittanyNichole. I have hooded eyes and I tend to do a lot of videos that suit my hooded eye boys and girls, but today we are not doing that at all. Today we are comparing the new 2018 Wet n Wild brush set that sold exclusively at Walgreens for $30 to last year's 2017 collection. So I'm gonna try to keep this one short and sweet. If you're interested in seeing that, go ahead and keep watching. So the first thing I want to point out is I've been reading the Wet n Wild Instagram picture comments, and someone who works at Walgreens said that this was going to be 50% off, so $15 the week of November 4th, which also just happens to be the best day of the year, my birthday. So make sure to keep an eye out for this at your local Walgreens or online at that time. That might be an in-store only exclusive. I know this happened last year because I found out about this in the middle of November or December, and everything was sold out and everyone was saying, I picked this up for $15 and it was the best ever. So if you can pick this up for 50% off, absolutely pick it up because it is totally worth it, whether you have last year's collection or you don't. So wanted to point that out first and foremost if you're not gonna watch any more of this video. So the next thing I wanna talk about are the differences that I can see right off the bat from the two collections. So the brush ferrule, that's the first thing that I see is different. So this year's collection has the whole fire dragon, ice dragon type of ferrule that you could see. And then last year's collection just has the smooth finish, and the colors are similar, but this year's collection has more of a pink tone, whereas last year's has more of a purple tone. So not super important, but wanted to point that out. So brushes that are repeated. Unfortunately, this is my least favorite brush from the collection. This one, which is the flat contouring brush. Unfortunately, on these holiday collections, they don't have the names of the brushes on the ferrule, which would only be important if you made YouTube videos, but just heads up about that. So they are repeating this brush. I don't like it. I think it's a little too dense as far as contouring. I think it kind of applies too much product at once. So I don't use this a lot, but if you are a flat brush contour lover, you'll like that they're repeating it again. I don't know if they chose to repeat it because it's one of their best sellers or what, but they are also repeating the tapered blending brush. So that is this right here. So this is this year's collection. This was last year's collection. I don't use this brush too often because I have a Smith brush that's very similar, and my Smith brushes I absolutely love, but wanted to point that out as well. I think it's nice though that this is kind of dual purpose. You can kind of apply and pack on product with this and then also blend. So I would assume this is one of their best sellers on their site. So those are the only two that they are selling that are the exact same, but the rest of them I feel are pretty similar. There's a couple new additions that I'm really excited about, but I want to kind of go through and compare the new to the old and what they kind of did to refine or change. So first brush that they have in the new collection that was completely lacking in the first collection is this flat brush right here, the flat shader eye brush. I guess they just call it a shader eye brush, but I think this was absolutely lacking in their first collection. Again, they have that brush I just showed you that could kind of be dual purpose for this, but I think this is a really nice addition, and it doesn't compare to anything in the past. I think that they kind of replaced this for last year's pencil brush, which I wish they did include some form of a pencil brush in the new collection. They did not, but I think a pencil brush is kind of necessary when you're doing your eyes. I did want to point out there are 5 face brushes, 5 eye brushes in this collection as well. So I think if we were going to compare this, which isn't really a comparison, it's almost a replacement. Last year we have the pencil brush. This year we have the flat shader brush. So I think this was necessary, and it's nice if you have both collections to kind of have two options here. So next brush we have is a flat foundation brush. So totally flat. A lot of people like these types of brushes for applying foundation. I'm kind of more of a beauty blender type of girl, but this is what this year's brush looks like. And then last year we had a similar one, but it kind of has, hopefully you guys can see it on camera here, a little bit of a divot in the middle, and I think that kind of holds foundation. I think Bare Minerals makes a similar brush like that. I didn't find myself reaching for this one like ever. I'm just not a foundation brush type of girl. But yeah, they kind of improved that by getting rid of the little divot, which I didn't love. So I think you guys might like that if you are someone who likes to apply your foundation with a brush. So the next one we have is this large powder brush, which I'm gonna just hold up last year's and then this year's. You could see I use last year's a lot. I mainly use this for bronzer, and I think they made a nice improvement here because you could see it comes to a little bit more of a taper at the top, which I like because sometimes this got a little too big for bronzing and I got powder in places I didn't want to get powder. So I think this was a nice improvement, and the brush is a little bit less dense than last year's, which is nice for all over powder or bronzing. So I think I will be using this one a little bit more than last year's. So the next one we have is a blush brush, which again, this is a totally new addition to last year's. If I had to compare it to something, I think I'd compare it to this brush right here. So you can see this year's blush brush and then last year's brush. I tried to use last year's brush for blush, but it was just a little too pointed for me and I didn't find myself reaching for it too much, and I know I will be reaching for this one since it's the perfect size for applying blush. So I think this was a very nice addition, and I think I'll definitely be reaching for that more than this brush right here. So the next one we have is a fan highlighting brush, which again, totally a new addition in this collection. They do have this highlighting brush from last year's collection, and I'm gonna kind of bring in another brush here from this year's collection that is similar but a little more pointed. So these two are this year's collection, this was last year's collection. So they kind of gave you two options for highlighting in this collection, which is nice. I use this one from last year constantly, almost daily, as my highlighter. I think it's a very, very nice shape. The density is really nice. And the one from this year, again, is a little more pointed. So I'm gonna see what I like better. I think I might still be reaching for last year's collection, but this might be a little bit, you know, better if you're trying to be a little more precise. And then I like that they're giving you the option for a fan brush. I really like using a fan brush right under my brow and then up here above the brow. I like that a little bit better than more of like a dense brush like this, but they are giving you two options in this collection, which is nice. I like that. So in last year's collection, they included this brush as well. I don't really have one to compare it to since they included two highlighting brushes in this collection. I think this is a little too dense for me for powder. I didn't find myself reaching for this too often. If you liked to really pack on, you know, powder after you applied your foundation, if you were like more of a light foundation wearer and you went on with additional powder, you might really like this brush, but I didn't find myself reaching for it too often. So I think this one was kind of a replacement with those two highlighting brushes if I had to categorize it into something. So the next brush is the blending brush in the collection. So this year's collection is right here, last year's is right here. You could see that this year is a little bit longer and comes to a little bit more of a point than last year's, which is nice for me since I own both brushes. Now, I use last year's blending brush constantly, almost daily in my routine. So I'm glad that I have another option here with this one. I think you can kind of compare this to like a MAC 222 because it's a little more precise, which I like with my hooded eyes. I can really get into areas I need to get into, and I like that I still have last year's brush as well. But if you only had this year's collection, I wish they would have included two of these brushes instead of like the repeated one from last year. I think blending brushes are a little more necessary, even though you can use that repeated brush from last year as a blending brush. I would have liked to see both these brushes in this collection, but I see what they were doing, and I'm sure that that one's like a best seller. So you can see the difference here. I'm glad to kind of be able to play around with this one and have last year's though. And then finally, we have kind of a replacement brush in this year's collection. So last year's collection had this one right here, which is like a flat concealer brush. And I thought I would use this one a lot for spot concealing, but I really don't. I just didn't find myself preferring to reach for this. I like to go in with my actual like beauty blender instead. So this year they included a flat concealer brush. So I think that's a nice addition, and I probably won't use this too much for concealing. I'll use it more for like kind of applying color all over the lid, but I think this was a really, really nice replacement for this brush since I really didn't use it at all. And that is it, you guys. I hope you found this helpful. I've been filming for 12 minutes right now, so this is a little longer than I wanted to, but I tend to go into a little too much detail when I talk anyway. So I hope this video was helpful to some of you. Let me know below if you're picking up this brush set or if you have last year's and what your thoughts are. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.